What's the creepiest, obsessive thing you have done? In elementary school we did the whole incubate and hatch chickens project, and they let us name the eggs. I named mine after a girl I had a crush on, who was in the class. I didn't discuss it before or after. I just shot my hand up and demanded one egg be named that. It never hatched. Much like our love. Best ending ever. When I was about 14, there was this guy who I talked to online a lot but I had never met. But my sister had kind of a weird story. Anyway, I had a gigantic crush on him. He lived about 8 hours away and my uncle happened to be going to his city. I gave my uncle his address and begged him to drive by his house and get a picture of it. Surprisingly, my uncle delivered. I cried when I got the picture and I set it as my desktop background. I also thought it would be a good idea to randomly send the guy whose house it was the picture one day when we were talking on AIM. He was weirded out, to say the least. It's cool now though cause we've been dating for 6 years and lived together. This wasn't me being creepy but rather a customer being creepy to me. I was working at a department store in the fashion department, and a larger than most bold mid-40s man started coming in every day. At first he'd browse the whole department, then only women's clothing, then only women's underwear. He would ask me questions like would I wear the ones with the pink lace, and I would never answer but rather go and get my manager to deal with it. It got to the point where he would come in and try to get me behind the clothing racks where the cameras don't reach. But of course I would just stay behind my fashion desk and politely ask that he approach me if he had any questions. Then she started getting really weird. He would come in and just sit and stare at me while holding women's underwear. I got permission to go into the back room whenever he entered the store. My coworker said he would ask where I was and she would just say that I wasn't working that day. One day he said, "Well, I saw her come in about 2 hours ago so I know she's here." He then proceeded to take women's underwear into the change room hidden in men's jeans and masturbate into them, leaving stuff in panties wadded up in the corner. As he was leaving he told the associate closest to the door that he wanted that fashion girl with the earrings to clean it up. Of course she didn't know what that meant until later. The next time he was spotted on our camera security immediately escorted him out and he was banned from the store. He would often sit outside and wait on the days I was closing so I always had a manager big guy walk me out. I was in love with a girl at school. I knew what bus she'd take home so I would be by the gate she left the school at. There were 3 exits to our school, just so I could get a glimpse of her. In my last year of school, we ended up sitting next to each other in biology class and became friends. My obsession became bigger. We saw each other often and would talk all the time but I was never brave enough to do anything about it. In my eyes, she was way out of my league. Anyway, 10 years later, we started talking on Facebook, good laughs and talking about old times. She then dropped an A-bomb. She used to go through a certain gate after school to get a glimpse of me. She asked the teacher in biology class if she could sit next to me because she thought it would help her grades. She wanted me to ask her to prom and dropped hints everywhere but I didn't pick up on them. She told me that all she wanted to do was be with me. I wish there was a happy ending to this story but there isn't. I was in a relationship at the time and so was she. Now, I'm single but she's in a different relationship and such. Every time I had a crush on a boy, we would have the happiest Sims life together in a beautiful house with adorable kids. You mean, not everyone does that? I went through the whole phone book and called all of the numbers with my crush's last name until I found the right one. I was 8. When I got my cat it had diarrhea for a few days, and it was wearing a cone after getting neutered, so it couldn't clean itself. Every time it took a shit would rub its A on the floor, carpet, bed, pillow, you get the picture. Brown stain everywhere. After the second day of this, whenever I heard that litter box sound, I would grab the baby wipes and run to the cat as fast as I could. After a few days I started saying, "Let's check out that A" every time it went to the bathroom. The voice slowly got deeper and more gravely, and for the next month, every time the cat went to the bathroom I would chase after it saying "Let me check out that A" in a deep, dark voice, and then say "Oh, that's a clean A." After staring into its butthole, I have no idea why I started to do that, and I don't anymore, but every time I hear that litter box scratching I want to go look at my cat's butt and talk dirty to it. Da fuck? I used to live in New York and late one Sunday, 10ish, I was on the subway going back home. There was a young hipsterish couple embracing and kissing and talking. It was gross and annoying. I mean, not really overly gross, but I was in a bad mood and it was Sunday evening and there was a lot of track work being done with a lot of stopping in the middle of the tunnel and a usual 10-15 minute subway ride was taking forever. So anyway, we're finally approaching my stop, so I stand up and start moving for the door, and so does she, without him. As we both exit the train, she stops just by the doors and they longingly stare at each other as the door closes. I'm standing behind her and I make my eyes huge and make eye contact with him with an evil grin on my face. I point at her and mouth the words, "I'm going to kill her." As his train pulls away, his look of horror was brilliant. I knew he had at least 5 minutes before he could get off at the next stop, run up above ground and use his cell phone to call her. Anyway, so then I just went home and ate a sandwich or something. I told my roommate at the time and he thought it was horrible, but hilarious. We discussed the possible long-term effects that I didn't take into consideration at the time. Like, the guy probably got off at the next stop, called her freaking out about some guy following her and what he saw me do. Then she developed a complex about being followed, resented him for her complex and they broke up. Or a million different scenarios. I do feel bad about it, but at the same time I find it hilarious. I used to work a shift job where my total workload took perhaps 2 hours of an 8-hour shift. The rest of the time was to be spent answering phones. During the summer, this place was notoriously slow, and so I'd wind up deep in the bowels of the internet, having jumped from one seemingly normal subject to another peripheral subject, the subject matter getting increasingly niche and strange. One day I was looking at upcoming PC games and it started getting my thinking of games I played as a teenager. That got me thinking about Gabriel Knight 2, The Beast Within. That got me thinking about the actor who played Gabriel Knight in that installment, Dean Erickson, which got me wondering what he was up to. Had he been in any other games? Had he gone on to star in television or film? This led me to his now defunct website, where he chronicled the sadness that was his life after Gabriel Knight 2. It turns out the offers did not come flooding in after GK2. He had played a waiter on Frasier for an episode or two, and then the rest of the journal was about him going on various auditions for roles, some that were paying, some that were not, and then never getting called back. The toughest part was he was so damn upbeat about the entire experience. Anyway, through more snooping I discovered he was also a personal trainer, the Dean team, with a pitifully hokey website as well as a licensed realtor. He eventually gave up his acting aspirations and went back to realty. His website listed his personal number. I called it. I heard the voicemail kick in and realized I had gone too far, way too far. Edit. As a wrap up to the story, I didn't leave him a message that day, but I did later friend him on Facebook and bought his book. He's my N-word now. I used to have a weird stalking fetish. I lived in an European town where people often use bikes, non-motorized bicycles, instead of cars as a means of locomotion, even at night. So I would randomly wander through the town on my bicycle around 2 AM, or later in the night, looking for, preferably attractive, biking girls. I would then proceed to follow the girl until her final destination, in most cases her home, while fantasizing about raping her. Usually I would also masturbate. Admittedly it is rather dangerous to masturbate while biking, but I got a kick out of it. I still don't quite understand where the fun of silently following a stranger comes from. It's all in the subtle details, like the average velocity slightly increasing after the first 15 minutes of stalking. Edit unfortunate typos. Edit to remove a word which made a sentence confusing. My buddy and I used to skate every Saturday. So one Saturday my buddy and I make plans to go to a skate park pretty far away. I wake up and decide to give my friend a holler. Pre-cell phones, only home phones for both families. No answer. Call back 30 minutes later. No answer. Call back 30 minutes later. No answer. Proceed to do this another 10-15 times, in shorter time intervals. Called my friend a total of 38 times in like 3 hours. His dad finally picked the phone up, cued me out, said I was to never call again. Had to explain via email to my friend and his family that we had plans to skate and I was waiting on him to leave. Turns out my friend went to the mall with his mom and forgot we made plans. I felt like an obsessive jerk, and ever since, that group of friends shunned me and constantly felt I was too obsessive. It made me sad for the longest time. Till I went to college and became incredibly sporadic with what I was doing and plans. I pretty much stopped making plans with people besides girls after this, and it even has an effect on me with girls. I may shoot them 1 or 2 texts, but if I never hear back, I don't ever send them another text and let it eat away at my soul while I wonder why they did not respond. Yeah, I might be effed up. Not about me, but rather, my crazy ex-girlfriend. We'll call her Katrina, like the hurricane. I dated this girl for around a month, but I broke it off as soon as I realized she was far more infatuated with me than I with her. We stayed friends afterwards, however, and talked a good amount still. Her brother was really cool, and I originally had liked her best friend, so I couldn't burn any bridges. Anyways, we all go to prom as a group of friends, not together. At prom, her date, we'll call him Bob, whom was a tad creepy at first glance, supposedly didn't wanted things to her, kisses, etc. The next day I found out that during the car ride home, Bob had gone further with his agitation. Katrina told me through tears what happened, and later Bob tried to explain himself to me via text. Needless to say, I was distraught and comforted her. The story spread around, and a large chunk of our group of friends began to shun him. My seeping rage was hardly contained whenever we crossed paths at school, but I never made a direct confrontation. He graduated, and the drama died off a bit. I stopped communicating with Katrina for the most part, but I really started talking to her friend. Around 100 texts a day. One night, Bob hacked my Facebook account to talk to Katrina, since he was obsessed with her. He told her how much I, myself, hated her, and how Bob was right. I didn't like her, etc. She called me at 2 in the morning to ask if what I said was true, and of course, I had to deny it. I changed my password to Pi for more security, right? So later Bob showed up at a football game and confronted her there after everyone else was gone. This happened after she had asked to watch the game with me, and I declined. I felt a little bad. The night before Thanksgiving, I got a text from Bob. It was very vague. Hey, do you still talk to Katrina? And this was months after I deleted his number, so I responded normally. I later realized the texts were from Bob since they were extremely creepy. I am outside her house. I knocked, and no one answered. Should I just go in? The lights just went off. I know someone is home. I had tried to tell Bob that she was out of town, visiting family for Thanksgiving. She had told me she was home alone, and I instructed her to lock the doors, grab a knife, and hide in a corner. No reply for an hour. I endlessly call her brother, her brother's girlfriend, and her best friend, hoping to get a hold of her. I call Bob and he tells me that nothing happened. He's just leaving. But he hid her phone so she wouldn't call the police. When she finally calls me, she's crying endlessly. She explains every detail, how she can barely move her leg, how scared she is. I finally convince her to call the police. Afterwards, she calls me to update me on what happened. I wrote a 5-page witness affidavit and talked to a police officer through email and over the phone. Katrina told me how infatuated she was with the police officer, and he even asked me through email whether he would have a shot with Katrina. Life continued as normal. Bob was in jail, and we grew closer as friends. I even accidentally made out with her once. I even met someone new, my current girlfriend, when I first flirted with her. Katrina's friend, the one who I'd been texting every day, made me feel absolutely shy, explained how I'd crossed the friend line, and I even apologized to my current girlfriend because I'd been told I had made her feel awkward. It turns out that Katrina had told my current girlfriend I was only talking to her to make Katrina jealous. So when I had apologized the day after, she thought that was what I was referring to. But here's the kicker. Bob never did anything to Katrina. She'd lied about him to me for almost an entire year. Fake tears and everything. And what's more, she had hacked my own Facebook to talk to herself about how much I didn't like her. Whenever I'd corresponded with him, it had been her. Whenever I'd corresponded with her friend, it had been her. Whenever I'd corresponded with her brother, it had been her. Apparently she used her iPad to get many different phone numbers. When I found out, her brother was horrified. I never talked to her again, but I kept seeing her everywhere. She wrote a super bullshit sorry note, but I never responded. She's been to my house 4 fine times because we have some of the same friends, and no one understands the deep amount of hatred I have for her. She even impersonated a police officer. Who the F does that? Poor Bob. Everyone hated him. You should never let me stay the night, ever. I frequently purposefully find myself in situations where I can stay the night with strangers or friends. Then I watch you sleep. It's amazing what people do in their sleep, and I am there to witness this. Every so often I take video of you sleeping. Nothing more, nothing less, just pure quiet video of you breathing and being asleep. I stay 4 hours and go from room to room watching 4 hours, and then I usually leave before anybody wakes up or gets wise. It's amazing people's sleepy time habits, and it fascinates me to no end. I have hundreds of hours of video of random folks sleeping. Sometimes I like to play games, but that is another post. I suddenly feel really normal and secure about myself as a human being.